It started as something small, barely noticeable, the kind of thing you brush off in a sleepy haze. That first night, I wasn't even sure I had heard anything at all. Just a soft metallic click in the distance. The kind of noise that could have come from anything. A pipe settling, a car door slamming outside, or maybe a dream blending into reality. But when I looked at my phone, the time read 3:33 a.m. I remember it because it felt strange, almost symbolic, like a number that meant something. I dismissed it and went back to sleep. After all, I live alone, and the door was locked. The next night, it happened again. Same sound, same time. I sat up in bed, more awake this time. I strained my ears in the darkness, trying to place the sound. It was subtle but distinct. A click, followed by a low creak, like a door slowly shifting against the frame. A familiar sound, but one that shouldn't have been happening. I knew I had locked the door before going to bed. I always double check. Living alone makes you cautious, maybe even paranoid. But still, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a draft, maybe the sound came from another unit in the building. Anything but what it sounded like. On the third night, I couldn't ignore it. I wasn't asleep this time. I was lying awake, half expecting the sound. When the digital clock on my nightstand turned to 3:33 a.m., I held my breath. Right on cue, the lock clicked. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a soft, deliberate turn, as if someone on the other side had the key. My heart started racing. I stared at the ceiling, listening. The silence after the click was heavier than any noise I'd ever heard. No footsteps, no voice, no movement. Just that one mechanical sound. And then, nothing. I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed. I just lay there, frozen. That morning, I checked the lock. Everything looked normal. It was still secure, still locked. I even convinced myself maybe I'd imagined it, but something in me knew better. I started paying attention, watching the time, lying awake in the dark, waiting for 3:33 a.m. Every night, the sound returned, unfailingly precise, like clockwork. First the click, then the creak. Sometimes, I thought I could hear the faintest brush of air, like something had passed through. I tried everything to stop it. I changed the lock. Not once, but twice. I installed a keypad lock that required a code. I even bought a heavy-duty chain and latch, but none of it worked. Every night, the same thing. 3:33 a.m. Click, creak. The chain didn't matter. The keypad didn't matter. The door opened anyway. Not violently, not forcefully. It just unlocked, like it was allowed to, like it belonged to something else entirely. I started staying up with the lights on. I set alarms, placed objects in front of the door, tried to catch it in the act. But no matter what I did, the door found a way to open. I thought about installing a camera, but part of me didn't want to know. I was afraid of what I'd see. I even considered calling the police. But what would I tell them? That my door unlocks itself at the same time every night, but there's no one there. That I'm scared of a sound, and yet the fear is real. It sinks into your chest like cold water. It keeps you awake, makes you question your sanity, your memory, even your reality. Something is happening, something I can't explain, something that starts with a click at 3:33 a.m. Living alone was never something that frightened me. In fact, I used to enjoy it. The peace, the privacy, the ability to move through my space without interruption. It felt like a kind of freedom. I could come and go as I pleased, arrange things the way I liked, stay up all night watching horror movies, or fall asleep on the couch without anyone judging me. The silence, once a comfort, gave me time to think, to breathe, to simply be. But when the door started unlocking itself every night, that silence transformed into something else entirely. It became suffocating. It became a vacuum where every sound echoed too loudly, where every creak of the floorboard made my heart stop. And suddenly, living alone didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like being watched. There's a particular kind of fear that only hits you when you know no one else is around. No roommates, no partner, no family member in the next room. No one to ask, "Did you hear that too?" Or, "Can you check the door for me?" When you're the only person in the apartment, every unexplained sound becomes your responsibility. Every fear, your own to handle. There's no safety net, no one else to rationalize things with. You're left alone with your thoughts, your paranoia, and whatever is causing the disturbance. After the second or third night of hearing the door unlock, at 3:33 a.m. I stopped feeling like this was just something strange. I began to feel vulnerable. I'd sit in bed with the covers pulled up to my chest, ears straining in the darkness, too afraid to move. The soft click of the door would freeze my entire body, and I would lie there, heart pounding, wondering if this was the night someone or something would come through it. And the worst part was knowing that if something did come in, I'd have no one to call out to. No one else was here, just me, wide-eyed in the dark, with a locked door that no longer meant anything. I started questioning everything. Did I really lock the door before bed? Was I sleepwalking? Was it possible that I was doing this to myself without realizing it? Those thoughts offered a kind of comfort, however fragile, because the alternative, that someone was unlocking my door while I slept, or that something unseen had the ability to open it, was too terrifying to accept. I tested myself, double-checked the lock every night, took pictures of it before sleeping, sat and stared at the door, waiting for it to move. But each night, despite everything, the lock would click open at exactly 3:33 a.m., and each time, the panic would rise in my chest like a tide. The solitude, which once felt like a gift, became a curse. I started hearing things that weren't there, whispers, soft thuds, the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. My own reflection in the window started to unsettle me. I began talking to myself just to break the silence, just to hear a voice. The television stayed on all night, not because I was watching anything, but because I needed the noise. Something to drown out the fear, something to remind me I wasn't completely alone, even if I was. Even the daylight didn't bring much comfort anymore. The sun would rise, and I'd walk through my apartment like I was inspecting a crime scene, checking locks, checking windows, checking for any sign that someone had entered. Nothing was ever out of place, and yet everything felt wrong. My home, once a place of safety, now felt unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Or worse, like I didn't belong in it. The most unsettling part of this entire experience isn't just the sound of the door unlocking, or the fact that it happens at the same exact time each night. It's the complete absence of anything afterward. No footsteps, no shadows moving in the hallway, no flicker of light or brush of wind, just silence, empty, endless silence. The door unlocks, but nothing ever seems to enter. At first, that should have been a relief. It should have calmed my nerves, reassured me that maybe it was a mechanical issue or a glitch with the locking system. But somehow, the nothingness became even more terrifying than the idea of someone being there. When something happens, at least it can be explained, reacted to, understood. But what do you do with silence? With the growing sense that something is wrong, even when there's nothing to see? It's not just in my head, I know that now. The precision of the timing, the consistency of the sound, it's too deliberate to be coincidence. And yet every time I gather the courage to check the hallway, there's nothing there. No figure, no open door, not even a breeze. The deadbolt will be hanging loose, sometimes even swaying slightly, but the air remains still. I've stood in the dark hallway moments after hearing the click, heart thudding against my ribs, expecting to come face to face with an intruder. But all I see is my own distorted reflection in the glass window near the entryway. I hold my breath, waiting for movement, expecting a whisper, a shift in the shadows, a sign that someone or something is there. But there never is. The door simply sits there, open or unlocked, and the air feels thick, as if holding its breath, along with me. What's even more disturbing is that nothing in the apartment is ever taken. moved, or disturbed. If it's a break-in, what's the purpose? Who or what would go to such lengths to unlock a door every single night, only to do nothing afterward? The absence of any tangible intrusion only deepens the sense of dread. It's like being haunted, not by a ghost, but by the idea of one. An invisible presence that doesn't need to show itself to be felt. And then there's the growing fear that maybe it's not coming from the outside at all. Maybe it's already here, inside with me. Maybe it never needed to walk in because it's always been waiting, watching, blending into the stillness of my apartment. That thought alone has kept me awake for hours, staring into corners, checking under the bed, opening closets with trembling hands. I haven't found anything, of course, but that doesn't ease the feeling that something isn't right. I've started to hear the creak of the floorboards long after the door unlocks. Even though I know I'm the only one who lives here, I've begun to feel cold spots in the hallway, sudden chills that don't match the room temperature. I don't know if I'm imagining them, or if I've become so consumed by fear that my mind is playing tricks on me. But the more this happens, the more convinced I become that something does enter. Or perhaps something stirs when the lock clicks. Even my dreams have changed. They're filled with images of doors slowly opening, of shadows standing just outside my line of sight. I wake up at 3:33 a.m. even when I try to sleep through it. My body seems to know it's coming, like it's been conditioned. And every time, I lie there, perfectly still, waiting to hear that familiar click. The tension is unbearable. Because this kind of nothingness doesn't feel empty. It feels deliberate. It feels like a presence that chooses not to be seen, that lingers just beyond perception. And that kind of silence is more terrifying than any scream. After the first week of hearing the door unlock every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., I decided it was time to take action. The fear was gnawing at my sanity. Every evening became a countdown to the moment I dreaded most, and I couldn't live like that anymore. So I took the most logical step. I changed the lock. I went to the hardware store, bought a brand new top-of-the-line deadbolt, and installed it myself. I tested it over and over, locking and unlocking it, making sure it worked smoothly. That night, I finally felt a small sense of control. I convinced myself the problem had been solved. But at 3:33 a.m., the same familiar click echoed through the silence. The new lock, fresh and untouched by time or rust, still gave way without resistance. I didn't even get out of bed. I just stared at the ceiling, numb with disbelief. The next morning, I upped my defense. I installed a digital keypad lock, something modern, coded, secure. It required a 6-digit code to open, one only I knew. The sound it made when locking was crisp, mechanical, final. There was no way anyone could tamper with it, not without me noticing. I locked it, double-checked it, and even recorded myself, entering the code several times to make sure it was working properly. That night, I watched the door from the couch, lights off, heart thudding like a drum. And at 3:33 a.m., the keypad lit up. Beep, beep, beep. One by one, the digits of my code entered themselves. Then the door unlocked. I was frozen, barely able to breathe. Nothing came in. Nothing moved. But the sound of the bolts sliding back on their own played over and over in my head like a broken record. I didn't know what to think. The idea that someone could be watching me closely enough to learn my code was terrifying, but there were no signs of forced entry. No fingerprints, no scratches, no disturbances. I even checked the walls and ceiling, convinced there might be hidden cameras, something I'd overlooked. But everything looked normal. I called a locksmith the next day, trying to explain without sounding completely insane. He came, inspected the locks, and quietly said everything was in perfect working order. When I asked him if anything could be triggering it remotely, he paused, then just shook his head and muttered, "Some doors don't want to stay shut." I didn't ask him to elaborate. By this point, I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically, but I still had one more. Idea: I bought a heavy-duty chain lock, one that would physically prevent the door from opening more than a few inches. I installed it high, near the top of the door frame, where it couldn't be easily reached from the outside. I felt a brief moment of relief as I snapped it into place that evening. It made a solid, final sound, like an anchor. But when the time came, 3:33 a.m., I sat in the dark, my eyes glued to the door. And it happened again. The main lock turned, the keypad blinked, and the deadbolt slid back. But this time, the door only cracked open a few inches before stopping, held back by the chain. And yet, something tugged. Not hard, not violent, just a gentle pull, like someone testing how far they could go. The chain strained slightly, rattled faintly, and then, nothing. It stopped. I approached the door at dawn and found the chain still intact, but the bolts were undone. The keypad was dark again, and the security app on my phone showed no activity. There was no explanation, no logical trail to follow. I began sleeping with furniture against the door, chairs, boxes, even a small dresser once. But every morning, they were undisturbed, still perfectly in place, as if the door never moved at all. But I knew it did. I heard it. I saw the lock turn. I watched the keypad glow, and I felt the cold draft that always came through the crack, even though nothing ever entered. The strangest and most chilling part of this whole experience is the evidence left behind after the door unlocks itself each night. It's subtle, easily dismissed by anyone who isn't paying close attention, but for me, it's become undeniable, proof that something is happening, even if I can't explain it. One morning, after a particularly restless night, I noticed faint footprints in the thin layer of dust on the floor near the door. They were small, too small to be mine, and they didn't match any shoes I own. The prints were smudged, as if someone or something had walked lightly, trying not to be noticed. I cleaned the floor immediately, hoping it was a one-time thing, but the next morning, the footprints returned, again and again. I started leaving small pieces of flour on the floor just inside the door, thinking it would reveal any intruder. Sure enough, the next morning, the flour was disturbed, scattered, as if someone had walked right through it. But when I checked outside, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints leading up to the door, no marks in the hallway or on the stairs. It was like the disturbance was coming from inside, not outside. It made no sense. How could the door unlock? Someone enter, leave traces, and then disappear without a trace themselves? One night, I left a thin thread tied from the door handle to a small piece of tape on the floor. I wanted to see if the door had actually been opened fully or just unlocked. The next morning, the thread was broken, the tape was ripped from the floor, but the door was still ajar, unlocked. It was as if the door had been pushed open gently and then closed, leaving the thread to snap in the process. Yet no one was there. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Just the broken thread and that eerie unlocked door. I even began placing objects in the doorway. A small chair, a box, anything to physically block the entrance. But every morning, the objects were untouched. The door was still unlocked, sometimes slightly open, but nothing had been moved. It was as if whatever was causing this didn't need to come inside. It only needed the door to be open. The lack of any real intrusion only added to my growing fear. Was something watching me from the other side? Or was it waiting for an invitation? Was the door unlocking itself to let something in? Or was it unlocking to let something out? At times, I found items in odd places. A book left open on the floor, a picture frame tilted just slightly, a chair pulled away from the table. Nothing too obvious, nothing I could definitively say was moved by an intruder, but enough to make me doubt my own mind. I began to question whether I was sleepwalking or losing my grip on reality. But the evidence of the footprints and the broken thread was physical, tangible, real. I even started documenting everything, meticulously. Photos of the footprints, videos of the flour on the floor, timestamps of every occurrence. I wanted proof in case I needed help, or maybe just to reassure myself that I wasn't imagining things. But the more I documented, the more it felt like I was capturing something that didn't want to be caught. Something that knew I was watching and was playing a game. A game I wasn't sure I wanted to win. Some nights, I swear, I hear faint whispers, low murmurs coming from the hallway, voices I can't make out but that sound close enough to be real. Other times, there's the faintest brush, like someone passing behind me when I'm standing near the door. But every time I turn around, there's nothing. Just empty space and shadows. Shadows that seem to stretch longer than they should, moving just out of the corner of my eye. The evidence is there, scattered in small, almost insignificant details. But the lack of a clear source, the absence of any physical intruder, and the consistent unlocking at 3:33 a.m. have made me question everything. I live alone, yet my door unlocks every night, leaving behind signs that someone or something has been there. And that reality is slowly unraveling the sense of safety I once had in my own home. The constant fear began to wear me down. Nights turned into a battleground between my will to stay calm and the relentless anxiety that gripped me as the clock edged closer to 3:33 a.m. I tried everything: earplugs, white noise machines, meditation. But nothing could stop the dread that flooded my mind when that precise moment approached. The door unlocking itself was no longer just a creepy mystery. It had become a symbol of vulnerability, a reminder that my solitude was fragile and that my sanctuary was not as secure as I thought. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer live in a state of perpetual fear. I called a close friend, someone I trusted completely, and told them everything. The noises, the door unlocking, the footprints, the strange disturbances. At first, they were skeptical, trying to rationalize the situation with explanations like faulty locks or stress-induced hallucinations. But I insisted they come over and see for themselves. The night they stayed with me, I made sure to lock the door, set up cameras, and prepare for the dreaded moment. We sat together, watching the clock, sharing whispered conversations to distract ourselves from the silence that seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. When 3:33 a.m. finally arrived, the door lock clicked open just like always. My friend's face went pale as we both stared at the door, frozen in disbelief. The chain I had installed held firm, preventing the door from opening any further, but the sound alone was enough to send chills down our spines. We checked the security cameras immediately afterward, hoping to catch some kind of intruder or mechanical failure. But the footage showed nothing unusual. No person, no figure, no shadow. Just an empty hallway bathed in dim light. It was as if the door had unlocked itself through some invisible force. That night marked a turning point. The reality of what I was experiencing became undeniable, and I realized I needed help beyond just friends and technology. I reached out to a paranormal investigator, someone with experience in dealing with unexplainable phenomena. They came prepared with equipment: EMF meters, infrared cameras, audio recorders, tools designed to capture what the human eye can't see or the human ear can't hear. For the first time, I wasn't alone in facing the unknown. The investigator spent several nights in my apartment, observing the door and monitoring for any unusual activity. They documented the exact moment the door unlocked, noting spikes in electromagnetic readings and strange fluctuations in temperature. The recordings captured faint whispers and unexplainable sounds that seemed to come from within the walls. It became clear that whatever was responsible for the door unlocking wasn't just a mechanical issue or a prank. It was something far more complex and unsettling. As the days went on, I learned to live with the presence rather than fight it. I stopped trying to block the door or prevent it from unlocking because I realized that resistance only seemed to make the experience worse. Instead, I started leaving offerings by the door, small gestures of respect and acknowledgement. It was a way of saying that I saw it, I understood it, and I wasn't afraid to coexist with whatever was there. Living alone used to be a symbol of independence and comfort for me. Now, it is a daily challenge, a test of courage and resilience. The door still unlocks every night at 3:33 a.m., but instead of fear, I've learned to meet it with a strange kind of acceptance. It's a reminder that some mysteries don't need to be solved immediately, that some forces operate beyond our understanding, and that sometimes the most frightening thing is not what we see, but what we know exists just beyond the edge of perception.